Hi, everybody. Welcome to Criminal Justice 201 Policing. I'm Professor Jason Ostro. This is week 8. And this week's lesson is police ethics, corruption, and misconduct. Always a hot button and important issue. Let's get started. So this week we will explain the importance of ethics in policing, discuss police corruption, listen to describe different types of police misconduct, and then discuss responses to police corruption and misconduct. So when we think about ethics in policing, what we think about are what are ethics? What does that actually mean, right? You can think of ethics as these broad moral principles that govern behavior, personal and professional conduct, differentiating between right and wrong. The issue with police is that there's an inherent role in our society, especially when it comes to the criminal justice system. All laws that are passed cannot and really should not be enforced. Why? Because there are so many laws. There aren't enough police to actually enforce their laws. And do we really want to live in a society where the police enforce every law that is passed? And some laws are often passed with the intent of not ever being enforced. Like, for example, I remember a few years ago there was a controversial issue about an individual who got a summons for sitting on a milk crate in the Bronx. This is a police officer who issued somebody a summons for sitting on a milk crate. And you say that's really ridiculous, isn't it? Sure, it is kind of ridiculous, but it's also ridiculous that it's against the law to sit on a milk crate. At least I would think so. Anyway, the idea is that sometimes legislators pass laws, to regulate certain types of behavior and conduct with, they have, unforeseen consequences, and sometimes with the intention of those never actually being enforced. So, all laws should not and cannot always be enforced, right? And this is where discretion comes into play, and that's why it's so important that we talked about in the past, discretion, right? And with discretion comes responsibility and accountability. And that is why ethics, corruption, misconduct are so important, because police are given a lot of discretion, choice in what they have to enforce and how intentionally they enforce it, where should they focus their energy. And also, when you think about this, in the United States, because of our federalist structure, there's really no national police force, or rather, there is no national police force. And as a result of that, there is no national code of ethics for police officers to follow. It's really hodgepodge of different police agencies that come up with their own codes of ethics. But there are organizations that come up with guidelines that police departments can follow. So ethics and principles are broadly reflected in police agencies' mission and value statements, as well as within their policies and procedure manuals. And these things guide what police do, how they should behave, what is appropriate from inappropriate behavior. But even with that, you have internal controls, oversight, and review of police departments. Policing in the United States is constantly under scrutiny, and as it should be. Now, what level of scrutiny should that be? Well, that's up for debate. But in our system of government, everybody and everything should be accountable to something else, right? And police, as agents of the government, have to be accountable to the people, and they should be accountable to the people through elected officials, reviews, commissions, the media. All those are important. One such commission that's really popular and well known is the Knapp Commission from 1970. And I bring that up because it's sort of really shown a light on corruption and misconduct in modern policing. When we think of the more modern era, the professionalism era on forward. The Knapp Commission in 1970 uncovered a variety of different types of misconduct within the New York City Police Department. And you see a picture there at the bottom. And I asked students in my live classes, does anybody know who that person is? And some people will say, that's Al Pacino, who is a famous actor. And it's not Al Pacino. It's actually a man named Frank Serpico. But the irony of that, or the coincidence rather, is that Frank Serpico was played by Al Pacino in a movie called, you guessed it, Serpico. And it's a depiction of the events of the 1960s and 70s in the New York City Police Department involving corruption. You want to see a really good film about, non-fiction film, about police misconduct in the 60s and 70s and where a lot of the stuff comes from, watch the movie Serpico. It's really interesting. Okay, so moving on. Ethics in policing is also controlled through judicial review. And courts have oversight of police departments through case law. Right? And there are examples of that, like cases that have dramatically changed and affected police behavior, including MAP v. Ohio and MAP hearings and suppression of evidence and exclusionary rule. Terry v. Ohio, which controlled police. It sort of did two things. It gave police the authority that already existed under the Constitution, but it also restricted police in when they can stop, seize, question, frisk, do that sort of thing. So it did both. Miranda v. Arizona, we think about how that case required the police to inform individuals of their Fifth and their Sixth Amendment rights under the Constitution. It didn't give them additional rights. It didn't give people additional rights. It just required that the police articulate those before an interrogation. There are reviews by citizen groups. There's reviews by the news media. District attorneys' offices have oversight of the police, and also U.S. attorneys' offices. Here in New York City, we have two federal U.S. district attorneys, and they have oversight of the police as well. They do investigations of misconduct and systemic misconduct and civil rights violations. They can bring charges, and they have. So even with these sort of oversight mechanisms, ethics in policing sometimes does occur, right? We know that from stories and from popular media and from social media. Ethics is really strictly adhering to an agreed upon certain types of principles, differentiating between what is right and what is wrong. Is very closely tied to the idea of integrity in policing. And what I'll say about integrity is this: there is nothing in policing that is more important than integrity. There's no personal attribute that a police officer could have than integrity. And integrity is defined in a variety of different ways. And when you think about what does that mean, it means a lot of different things. I like to think about it as actionable honesty. So, there's telling the truth, right? There's being honest and forthright. But then there is also acting in a way that is always honest and forthright. And integrity, in my mind, is actionable honesty, acting in a way that is always honest, true, forthright, and ethical. A lot of people say, and this is just sort of like an inside baseball definition of integrity in policing. They'll say integrity is the idea that you always do the right thing even when nobody's watching. Like you can get away with doing the wrong thing when you're a cop and it's the middle of the night and somebody hands you a pocketbook and says, "Officer, I found this pocketbook," and nobody's around and it's not a setup. Well, a police officer can say, "Thank you, ma'am," and throw that in the garbage. That would certainly be unethical, right? Certainly be unethical. A police officer could take that bag and see if there's any money and take the money. That would be unethical and illegal, right? Unlawful, would be crime. Or the police officer could do, police officers who have integrity and act with integrity, take that bag, account for its contents, get the information from the person who handed the bag over, bring that bag to the police station house and account for all of the materials and voucher that and try and contact the owner of the bag. That's integrity. Right? That's an example of integrity. Okay, so enter this concept of police corruption. And corruption is something that was defined by Goldstein. So I'm going to go to the bottom of that slide right there first. Police corruption defined by Goldstein, who is a famous police scholar from the 1970s. And you can define that as acts involving the misuse of authority by a police officer in a manner designed to produce personal gain for himself or for others. All right, so misusing your authority as a police officer to benefit yourself or your friends or something, family. All right, and when you think about this idea of police corruption, it really involves two ways of happening, and I'm looking at the top there: acting under your official capacity, receiving a benefit, something that that you should not get. Like it could be through commission or omission. Commission or omission. This is important. This is going back to criminal justice 101 and the idea of actus reus and culpability and all that stuff. So commission is committing something that doing something that you should not have done. You committed a crime. Right? You stole something. You committed a crime. Omission is failing to do what you are legally required to do. All right? Commission, I committed a crime. I stole money. Omission, I was required to place this person under arrest, but I let them go because I know them personally and I want to do them a favor. That's omitting. That's omission, failing to do what you're required to do. So crimes involving commission, involve everybody, right, across the board. Crimes involving omission rarely affect the general public, but they often involve public officials, police officers, school teachers sometimes, doctors, politicians, whatever. And I'll give you an example. Like a child who has been is victimized in some way or is in danger, their welfare is endangered. If you leave them in a home, and you're a police officer and you fail to report that, that's an omission. You're required to report that. Like your school teacher, a kid comes to you and says, I was abused, or comes with bruises and is all beat up or something, and you don't report that, then that's again misconduct because omission. Um, and same thing with doctors. So anyway, commission, omission. Commission really applies to everybody. Omissions really, for the most part, apply to only uh, you know, the public officials or somebody in an official capacity of some sort. There's bribery and there's bribe receiving. Bribery is this idea that if somebody is paying you or giving you some kind of benefit as a public official, in this case a police officer, in order for to affect your behavior. So a police officer pulls somebody over, and that person says, "Officer, I can't afford a summons, but if I'll give you $100 if you let me go." And you do, you let them go. That's bribery, right? That's bribery, and receiving that money is bribe receiving. So that's can't do that, right? Official misconduct is using your authority. It's like a catch-all umbrella term. It's like a police officer who uses their authority to benefit themselves, right, and does something unlawful, right? So you want to. A good example would be you show up to a domestic violence incident. Terrible. Like you show up to somebody's apartment because somebody calls 911 because they're screaming at the apartment next door, yelling and screaming and fighting. Police show up. They knock on the door. Somebody opens the door and they say to the police, "Oh, officers, everything's okay here. I'm a cop. I'm on the job, so don't worry about it. I got it all taken care of." And meanwhile, there's people in the background are injured and there's injuries and people are hurt and they need medical attention. You say, "You know what? Hypothetically, you're a police officer," and the police officer says, "Don't. You know what? You're a cop. Don't worry about it. We'll just forget if this ever happened," and they take off. That's official misconduct. You are required, to take action. You have domestic violence. You have calls for help. There are people who are, visually, they're visually injured and they're asking for assistance. So official misconduct, right? You can be arrested for that. Not even fired. You can be, locked up. Official misconduct. You're doing somebody a favor. Are you really doing them a favor? I mean, you're going outside the scope of your duties there. Okay, receiving unlawful gratuities. Think about that as a tip. A tip. So a police officer receives a tip. Officer, thank you so much for your great service and really helping us out. I want to give you this $50 bill, for doing the right thing. You can't accept tips as a police officer, right? You can't accept a tip, Christmas bonus. You can't do that. That's receiving an unlawful gratuity. The difference between bribery and gratuities is this. Bribery and bribe receiving refers to being compensated for a bad act. Somebody pays you off to look the other way when a crime, because the drug dealer is paying you off. So you drive by the drug deal. That's bribery, right? Unlawful gratuity is you being compensated for a good act unlawfully. So you catch the burglar of the month, and the community board is so happy that they want to give you a $500 Christmas bonus. That's an unlawful. You can't take that. It's an unlawful gratuity. Anyway, so bad act, good act, both are official misconduct. Right? So police corruption. This is where this idea comes from. Why does police corruption occur? Because police officers are human beings, and human beings are fallible, right? They come across these moral dilemmas, and there's police cynicism. Cynicism is this idea that you can think of it as like this. It's more than just a negative attitude, but it's like sometimes people are exposed to negative things over and over and over again, and they always look at everything as like terrible. The glass is half full, empty, excuse me. What's the point? Being a cop is just a waste of time. You arrest these guys and they're out 5 minutes later to commit more crimes. It's silly. It's a waste of time. Nothing works. Like that's a very cynical attitude. That's police cynicism. Right? A lot of discretion in policing. Right? You have to make decisions about what to enforce, when to enforce them, and constant exposure to criminals, temptations that could happen as well, money to be made, and perceiving injustices. These aren't all inclusive. These are just some reasons that the police corruption occurs. Um, and I've been asked this by my students, and I will always say that when students ask me questions related to policing, I will always be honest with them. Always give you the honest answer. Now, if you ask me questions related to other things, I might not be so truthful, like my personal life. But like when it comes to my experiences as a police officer and my own point of view, based off of those experiences, I'm always honest. Because I do you no favors by hiding anything, right? So, and I've been asked, have you seen corruption? And my honest to God answer as a police officer, former police officer, 15 years, a little over 15 years as a police officer, I can tell you with, you know, God's honest truth that I've never, ever seen any type of police corruption in 15 years, personally, ever. Now, now we have to get to what does police corruption mean? Like if a cop takes a cup of coffee for free, right? Like the guy in the corner says, a police officer's online to buy a cup of coffee, and the guy behind the coffee wagon says, coffee cart says, no, 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 officer, here you go, it's on me. Thank you for your service. And he gives the officer a cup of coffee, and the officer takes it. Is that corruption? If you define that as corruption, then I would say yes, that I have seen police corruption. If you say that's not really police corruption, then I would say that I have never seen police corruption because I've seen things like that, but I've never seen, free meals, free food, free coffee, but I've never seen, some cop taking money, selling drugs, beating people up, shaking down drug dealers or something. No, I've never seen that. And if I did see that, like almost all police officers, again, I'm a former police officer, but I think like almost all police officers, they would report that because that's a danger to everybody. You're a cop and you fail to report, a criminal cop. That's what that is, a criminal cop. That's official misconduct. You're going to go down with them. So nobody wants to work with people like that. So anyway, that's the God's honest truth. As defined, corruption as defined, the way that I've explained it, I have never in 15 years of being a police officer personally witnessed any police corruption, ever. Okay, and so let's move on. Okay, so police corruption, they talk about a lot of different things. You got this rotten apple, right? Some people say, well, it's the whole system. They call it rotten barrel. And then others will say it's the individual officer. That's the, rotten apple. There are social structural explanations like conflict theory, things like that, that people try and use or academics try and use to describe police corruption. The neighborhood because of social disorganization, ideas like that. Police work and the nature of it alone, long hours, constant exposure to this negativity, the organization itself. In the United States, policing is like people, we really focus on what's happening in New York City because policing, number one, is local. Number two, New York City is the biggest city in the United States. Number three, it's the media capital of the world. Number four, it has the largest police department in the United States. So when something happens in New York City, it's like national attention. It's like, wow, there's so much corruption in New York City, But I think if you actually take a step back from that and you really analyze it, it's not actually it's much more complex than as it may seem. And if you study corruption in police departments throughout the country, not throughout the world, but throughout the country, what you'll find is that there are police departments that have major, major problems with corruption, misconduct. They don't get the type of attention that big city police departments like LAPD, NYPD, that get. But New Orleans, for example, New Orleans Police Department has a history of just god awful corruption, misconduct, crime. Cleveland Police Department. You can look at any number. Detroit, Washington D.C. That their corruption, their sort of corruption scandals are way worse than what you would expect to see in places like what you do see in places like New York. Just again, New York gets the attention. And then when you compare corruption in police departments in the United States compared to other parts of the world, which some academics do that, uh, policing in America is actually really, really, there's, tremendous accountability. And this is not to say corruption doesn't occur, but when it does occur, generally people are outraged by it, which they should be. And there's often, very harsh accountability. It may not seem that way, but again, let's just differentiate corruption from, what might be seen as an inappropriate use of force. Those are different, right? So corruption, you go to some countries and you get pulled over by the police. It's expected that you pay them in order to get out of the ticket, and that's very common throughout the world. You try doing that in New York City, and you will end up in handcuffs for attempted bribery. You know? And so, there's much different when you look at the culture. Anyway, so police subculture, this idea that there's loyalty to a specific group and group solidarity. I want you to read about this. I'm not going to go too deep about it, but grass eaters versus meat eaters, the NAP Commission identified like low-level corruption versus more serious corruption. That like these serious corruption can be, gratuities, bribery, theft, burglary. And then there's something that what they call, trying to do the right thing, which is what they know as noble cause corruption, which is like a police officer engages in corruption after trying, because the ends may justify the means, at least in their own mind. Like there's a serial murderer on the loose, right? And he's unfortunately, he's taking people's lives, murder on the loose, and the police think they have him, but they don't have enough they don't have probable cause yet to arrest the guy, but they see him, and they're pretty sure that's the guy, so maybe they fake up some evidence to arrest the guy. Would you be okay with that? Well, the police got a murderer off the street, but they didn't really have enough evidence. So our system of justice requires that they have to have probable cause. Anyway, the idea here is this, noble cause corruption, that the police are trying to do the right thing, and the end result is the right thing, but by doing that, they're doing the wrong thing. So when an officer like bends the rules, flakes somebody, that's police speak for like drumming up evidence, falsifying a report, falsifying, some kind of confession. And this picture of this individual at the bottom, his name is Christopher Perino. I didn't know him personally, but he was in the news a few years back, and it's really unfortunate. He was a 20-something year detective of the NYPD. He was interrogating a juvenile for attempted murder. A juvenile, got a gun, shot another guy in the face, and didn't kill him, but shooting robbery type of situation, or shooting gang related. I don't remember all the details. Anyway, the sum and substance. Christopher Perino interrogates the shooter, the perpetrator of this crime, the alleged perpetrator, and when it goes to trial, Christopher Perino perjures himself. He lies on the stand and he says that, oh, I never interrogated the client. I never interrogated the kid. The reason he's saying that is because when somebody is under a certain age and they're in police custody, they have to be accompanied by adults, or parent, guardian, whatever, if they're being interrogated. And so anyway, this the alleged perpetrator had recorded this interrogation. So Christopher Perino was found on the stand to have perjured himself. He was arrested, and the attempted murder charge. So this kid was looking at like 25 years in prison. The attempted murder charge was thrown out as a result, and the gun charge that is stuck on the kid. But and so Christopher Perino gets fired, and he ended up having to go to jail. Not for too long, but still, so noble cause corruption can be very bad news. All right, and then this is differentiated from police misconduct. Police misconduct relates to really anything wrong. Corruption is misconduct is not corruption, but corruption is always misconduct. Okay, so police misconduct is breaking any kind of rule of the police department. So that could be anything that's drug related. Like, for example, drinking alcohol on duty is not against the law, but it's definitely against the rules of the police department. Using drugs, prescription medications, recreationally, even if you have a prescription for them, that could be, misconduct. Sleeping on duty, deception, falsifying reports, that would be both corruption and misconduct. And, sexual related misconduct, on duty sex, things like that. Yeah, big time. That's been made criminal in New York State now. Off-duty incidents, right? Domestic violence, bias-based policing, police brutality, all this stuff. It's just examples of misconduct. And all of this has negative implications for the police, the society, the community, right? Like it makes people, the good guys, men and women who are out there trying to do the job, it makes their job even harder. Bad publicity, right? Reduced confidence, morale goes down in the police. People get sued, people get arrested, public embarrassment, right? You get all these other things that happen as a result of misconduct. And I will say this, that this is the former police officer in me speaking, not the, not, I don't have, this is not research based, but what I will say is that one of the things that good police officers hate more than anything else is a bad cop. And what I mean by that is a corrupt cop or a cop that engages in misconduct and brutality because it makes their lives so much more difficult. And so the culture in the police department really is that they really dislike when that happens. People think cops they don't care. They do because it hurts them. It hurts them. It hurts them a lot. So anyway, we'll just move on from that. So, what are some responses to problems and corruption, misconduct? Like large police departments have, internal affairs investigations. They do like integrity tests. They they even have within the police department. They'll pull over police vehicles and inspect the vehicle, make sure you're not shopping on duty or something like that. There's no alcohol in the car. Right? So they do like these compliance checks. The civilian oversight, CCRB, like in Citizens Commission to combat police corruption. There's outside agencies like the U.S. District Attorney's Office, including there's also 5 district attorneys in New York City that have oversight of the police department. So, and all this is obviously a really big topic. This lecture went a little long, but it's a lot of stuff here. This is an important lesson. So for this particular week, your assignments, make sure you read. It's a short reading on misconduct and corruption. All right, remember those are 2 different concepts. And then there's a really provocative video here. It has 2 parts. It's only about 15 minutes long in its entirety, about 7.5 minutes each. And it's really disturbing and troubling. But, it's policing. So policing sometimes deals with disturbing and troubling things, especially when it comes to misconduct and corruption. So it's a 2-part video. I just want to caution you in advance. And then I want you to make sure you complete the discussion board assignment, all of the questions by Thursday, response by Sunday as usual. Okay, I hope you found this helpful, and I will see you online throughout the week.